what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we're actually doing something that we haven't done too much of on this show, but we're going to go back and talk about our feelings for the season of a show that we've already talked about the beginning couple of episodes on this show before. And that show today is House of the Dragon. I only remember doing this like maybe one or two other times. I feel like we did this for Midnight Mass, and maybe we did it for one other thing. But regardless, we are going to go into spoiler territory for potentially the entire season of House of the Dragon. And these episodes are pretty dense, so we're not going to be obviously be talking about the specifics of every episode, but big details will absolutely get spoiled here. So if you haven't seen the season, go finish it on HBO Max and then come back and see what we have to say about it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump right into it. So, House of the Dragon, I feel like when I started watching it, I don't remember how you felt at the time, but I remember that I was positive overall on it because I was surprised. I think I went in with very low expectations for the first episode, and the first episode caught me off guard. I was like, okay, I'm kind of into this. But it was very much a kind of base level. I could watch this. This is better than I thought, but I'm not in a hurry to finish this. And so I actually did not watch it until like maybe. Actually, I think I watched it when there was 2 weeks left before the season finale. So by the time I got to the last episode, I was able to watch the last two episodes because that episode had just come out that Sunday. So I basically caught up by the end of the season. And that mainly happened because I started watching it like maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks before that and got pulled in and was surprised because that felt like a show that legitimately just kept getting better. And it surprised me turn and turn again. And I'll get into specifics later, but just generally, like, what was your journey? How are you feeling about the show?
Yeah, I mean, I was like, oh, another spin-off of a show that was successful, but Game of Thrones did not end very well for us. So going into House of the Dragon, I had a very low expectations. And so after the first couple of episodes, I think I was like, it's not too bad. Like they're doing it. It's not as captivating and interesting as Game of Thrones, in my opinion. But as the season went on, I was getting really, really more and more into it. And for this kind of show, I 100% watch it every week because I don't want spoilers.
Yeah.
There's just some certain shows that I will do that for. And this is one of them. So watching it every week and like having the episode and I'm like, oh, another wait another week. You can only get that kind of reaction from me if it's really good, because otherwise I just forget to watch it or I just never come back to it. So the fact that I kept coming back for it every week meant that they were doing something right. And looking back on the whole season, I really enjoyed it, and I am kind of upset about how it ended, because it just felt like a huge cliffhanger, and I thought that it would have kind of more of a big shebang, but but it's still like I'm still excited to find out what happens next. And I mean, this is a much simpler, you could say toned down version of Game of Thrones, because it's not like there's not as many pieces moving around, but there are, like, because it's generally it's one big family, and it's about this one big family, House of the Dragon, versus all these different families that are fighting against each other. So it's interesting that they were able to make this one family so exciting.
Yeah, I mean it's probably because a lot of the family is has a lot of inbreeding in that family, but that's a different. That's just Game of Thrones, right? Yeah, I was surprised because Game of Thrones does a really good job of just like really developing characters, and the thing that this did differently is that when we watched the original Game of Thrones, we were watching the story of these houses take place over the course of several years real time, right? Like we were seeing like some time obviously passed within the show itself, like when you watched it like during a season, maybe you could argue that a couple of months, maybe even a year might pass in the season, but we were progressing with the show over the years the same way that it was moving years in the show itself too. People were getting older and things like that. So that was what I was kind of expecting with House of the Dragon. I was expecting a similar structure. At first I didn't know if it was only going to be one season, like a one-off, and then be done. But I was surprised to see that when we hit our first time skip, it caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting a time skip, because that's not something Game of Thrones has done in the past. It progresses in real time, more or less. And so to see that first time skip after the first, I think 3, maybe 4 episodes, it really like took me aback. Also because of the fact that I had liked the original like actors and actresses that were portraying these characters, and most of them still stay the same. Like Daemon is still Matt Smith, and the king is the same and stuff like that. But Rhaenyra changes, and her friend, I forget her friend's name in this moment. Alicent also changes, and then but they only change once, but then we get a second time skip, and the kids are what change after that. So the kids, I think, theoretically go through I think they have 2 different castings for the kids. And so that just really caught me off guard. But then when it happened, I was like, I kind of like this. I wasn't expecting this, but okay, this is kind of cool. So that was a structure that I wasn't expecting. But when I finally did see it, I was very happy with it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. At first, I was like, wait, what? Why are we doing a time skip? But although I do think that the casting for the older version of Alicent was like spot on.
She looks like the actual, like the girl actually aged into her. I was so confused.
Are they like related or something? Maybe she was like the older sister or something. But yeah, I was really impressed with that. Although I was kind of, shocked that there was this like kind of jarring transition where the next episode is just suddenly they're all older, and then the second time it happens, it just feels a little bit more acceptable because they had already done that.
Done it. Mm-hmm.
And at least they don't change everyone, and they do this in other shows like The Crown and stuff like that, where there's just led me to think like, okay, maybe we're covering essentially the entire history of the House of Dragon all the way up to the Mad King. Mm-hmm. So there's like, I think 172 years, something like that, from when the Mad King or Daenerys her story starts. So I think that would be very interesting if that's what they're going for. I'm down for that, because that would be a pretty cool show to watch, as opposed to having the same characters like the whole time, and they're just going through this endless cycle of like, you betrayed me and then I betrayed you, well that's because you betrayed me, and all these family drama things. But if it's like generations and generations of backstabbing and murdering each other, and then there's this whole legend of fire and ice and everything like that kind of explains the beginning of Game of Thrones, I think that would be a very compelling show to have. So I hope that's what they're going for.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see where the plans for this show are going. Unfortunately, we have to wait. We're not going to get another season of this until 2024. It's already been confirmed that these shows take forever. Same thing with Andor, actually. Andor's next season is not coming until 2024 as well. So these shows are just getting longer in the tooth to make and more expensive. So we're going to have to wait a while before we can actually see. But I'm curious as well, and I really like how shows like this show the passage of time within like shorter time bursts as well. Because there are times when we see Rhaenyra and she's not pregnant, then we know time passes because we see her or Alicent and now they're pregnant, and then we see them again and they're not pregnant and they have a kid, they have a little baby, or we see that they have more kids than they had before, but we never saw them pregnant. So like it shows the passage of time through characters that you see. With the pregnancy. Yeah, pregnancy specifically. But But yeah, there are like no, like there are mentions. There's just like, oh, Rhaenyra has been doing this for like the last couple of months or things like that. Like they do it organically through visuals and through dialogue, and so I like that. But we never actually see any headers that say like 7 years later or 4 months later or anything else like that. And I just think that that really works for a show like this. It really keeps me engaged, and it makes it so that I feel like I'm paying attention more because they're not just feeding me that information. So that is something that I absolutely found very, very enjoyable for this show.
Yeah, and I think they do a very good job of, giving you surprises. Like it's very close to how Game of Thrones feels, where you kind of like root for some people, and then people die, and people you don't want to die, or bad things happen to people that you like, and good things happen to people you don't like. Very Game of Thrones. Um, and just the brutality of it as well. Although one thing that was mentioned to me is that there isn't really one character where like you just is like just generally all around good. So in Game of Thrones we had like Ned Stark, who he was a good guy, but he died because he was too good and he was too honest. But then you had Jon Snow, who was just basically, the one that you just completely root for. And then you have like Bran, where you're like, oh yeah, he's
He
there's
exists.
all these Starks where you're like, yeah, the Starks you just root for, except for Sansa. Um, no
Yeah.
one roots for Sansa. So yeah, like there's this whole family of characters that you kind of root for, but there isn't really something like that. Like there are families within this family, but I guess like we're like rooting for Daenerys family or
Rhaenyra.
Rhaenyra's family,
Yeah.
but they all still kind of suck in some way, and it kind of reminds me of Daenerys because you do start out rooting for her, but then she kind of changes into this person where you feel like you can't want her to win anymore.
Yeah, but that's actually something that I think I like a lot about the show is that it shows how your allegiances can shift and it makes people feel more like real people. Because yeah, you do start off rooting for Rhaenyra, and then Rhaenyra is a little is a, lack of a better, I'm not going to say that word, but she is bad. Okay, she does some things, and you don't like Rhaenyra for a little bit, and so then you're kind of feeling for Alicent, and then Alicent starts doing some stuff, and you're just kind of like, yo, Alicent, you and your family ain't that cool either, and so they all start doing these kind of shady things, and your allegiances kind of shift until like the end, where I think your allegiances firmly like lie in Rhaenyra's camp because of what happens. And based off of that, also, I would say that the only innocent characters in this show are her children. Her
Mm-hmm.
children are the innocents because they haven't done anything wrong. They've been simply born into this world, and they didn't choose to be born in. They didn't choose their parentage. But the things that I like about House of the Dragon is its relevance to the overall Game of Thrones like universe and story, because the whole idea is when I asked myself when I was watching this, like, okay, why are we watching this specific timeline? And one is the timeline where we really start worrying about the Song of Ice and Fire. That is like what Rhaenyra has been tasked with, and that is what mainly stays her hand from just trying to go to war, because she says, I have a bigger battle that I'll have to fight, even though it'll not happen in her lifetime. She doesn't know that. But that ties to obviously Game of Thrones proper because of the fact that that is the Song of Ice and Fire that happens then. The other thing that ties to it is the themes, and it's a theme I did not realize until watching House of Dragon. But the theme of Game of Thrones seems to be when you have to choose duty or love, you choose duty. And if you don't choose duty, if you choose love, you and other people will die. So if you look at it with the original House Game of Thrones, it was the Lannisters, Jaime and Cersei. They chose love over duty, and because of that, Joffrey Baratheon was the same case that was happened with Rhaenyra and her children. He didn't have a real claim to the throne, but they said that he did, and that's the whole reason why Ned died, and that's why the whole war started. Robb Stark died because he chose love over duty, because he didn't choose to marry Walder Frey's child, one of Walder Frey's children, and so he died. And now we have Rhaenyra, who chose also to be with the Strong family, the Strong guy, that's his last name, and now her children are called bastards and also don't have a real claim to the throne, but no one can really talk about that. So it's actually very similar to the whole situation with the Baratheons in the future. So I thought, once I realized that, I was like, oh my god, this show's amazing. This whole like concept is amazing. Love
Yeah,
or duty.
it's very consistent with Game of Thrones, and I think that's the thing that really hooked me is that I 100% feel like I'm in the same place, and though things are a little different, looks a little bit different, like the Iron Throne looks different, but it's still like in the same universe. And I
Mm-hmm.
think and we get to see a lot of things that are familiar, so for something you could consider a franchise, they do a very good job playing on your heartstrings but also being consistent with what was already established, and I think that's what makes it so compelling.
Yeah, and when we get to the last episode, so much of that episode is like, okay, we're like the episode before that, it already seems like we're about to go to war because it like everything in House of the Dragon is basically set up. It is all getting you to know these characters, setting up the conflict, and the moment that the king passes, after he says what he says to Alicent, thinking that he's talking to his daughter from a conversation earlier, it just sends everything into a spiral. But then you find out, even if he hadn't said anything to Alicent, everyone was already planning on supplanting Rhaenyra anyway, and it's all like based in misogyny and sexism, and and it's amazing to see how everything starts to come to a head, and we get to the point where I forget her aunt. Oh, man, I'm forgetting people's names now. But Rhaenyra's, I want to say it's Rhaenyra's aunt. It was the king's sister, but when she escapes with her dragon, and she has a moment to just kill the entire family, and if she had done that, she would have actually stopped a war from happening. At least would have it would have taken a little bit longer to happen than what ends up happening. But afterwards, Rhaenyra's doing her best to try to also keep the war at bay, but because of their children, because their children and their children do a lot of stuff in this, but because of their children, war is going to break out, and it's all because of some guy just acting like a dummy. Like, I'm sorry, like that kid is a dummy because he did not like. My names are like escaping me, but basically, the kid who had Rhaegar, the biggest dragon, and then goes after Rhaenyra's son because he wants to get. He's like, I'm gonna get your eye, I'm gonna get your eye, but he's like trying to scare him, and then loses control of his dragon, and then accidentally kills the kid. And then now Rhaenyra, who was trying not to go to war, that last shot when we see her, she looks like she's the Mad Queen, and you can't even be like upset with her because it's like y'all just killed her kid. Y'all killed the kid of a queen. There can be nothing left but war.
Right. Yeah, and that's unfortunately how they end the season. Like I mentioned, big cliffhanger, no war yet. So, but yeah, I was actually wonder why. Gosh, I can't remember the name. It's the king's cousin, and I want to say it's like Rhaenyra or something like that. It's not Rhaenyra, but it's
Rhaenys.
Rhaenys. Yeah. Um, I don't know why she doesn't kill the family. I mean, obviously, like if she did, there would be no show. But she comes back and she essentially takes Rhaenyra's side and says, like, I didn't do it because it's not
Place to start a
my.
war.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was an interesting move. I'm not sure exactly how that makes sense. but
I
sure.
mean, if she had burnt them, then Rhaenyra's son would have lived.
Um, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I was wondering, and I'm that's why I'm like, man, this next season, I wonder if Damon's gonna say something like that. If you had just killed them, my son would still be alive, or my wife, my niece's son would still be alive. That family's so weird.
But like the issue I have with that though is like it has to make sense. Like the choices need to make
Like,
sense.
why wouldn't she kill them?
Exactly. Like I feel like they had done enough to her to make her want to kill them, so she probably would have done it. But like I feel that her character would have done that unless there was some other strategy that she had to let them live, like maybe let them kill each other or something. But I don't see how it would have benefited her, especially if like she had kind of an alignment, um, like allies with Rhaenyra for her family.
But she
So
didn't really up until that point. She wasn't really trying to pick any side. She was kind of towing the line because she wanted to like kind of support. She wanted support for herself. Rhaenys, like she didn't really choose to support Rhaenyra until she saw that Rhaenyra was trying her best not to go to war. But before that, she wasn't like trying to support Rhaenyra or Alicent.
but she went to where Rhaenyra was, so
Yeah.
that's why, and gave her the warning, so that they were gonna
Mm.
come. So that's why I'm like, you might as well have just killed them then, if you're gonna be like, just come in here and be like, well, this is what they're doing. I could have killed them, but I didn't. But I'll give you
Yeah.
intel on what's up. So
That's what, right? I mean, more people are about to die because of this anyway. But yeah, if you had just taken out the leadership, you wouldn't have had anyone that could like I guess challenge your throne anymore. But it
yeah,
is what it is. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying there. Like, does it make sense for that character outside of a decision to just keep the show going? Is this what the character would have actually done in this situation?
yeah.
Especially considering everything. So no, I hear you there. Um, but yeah, that being said, like I think overall the storytelling and the characterization of everyone is very solid. Um, we also have the knight. I wanted to say Sir Gregor, but that's not Sir. It's not Sir Gregor. Like this is what happened when it's like been weeks and you don't rewatch it. But the knight that Rhaenyra was at that she had named to be the protector of her father, in the beginning couple of episodes, and then had an
Oh,
affair with him,
like
and then
Christian or something like that.
Sir Sir Kristen or something. Yeah, but he is even a character that he started off being good and someone that you could root for, and then you see him like do a hard shift where he is like mistreating children and like he is like heavy into Alicent and like he accidentally maybe kills one of the people at the table when they're talking about what they're gonna do to make Aegon king, the kid, and yeah, it's he takes a hard turn. So he's another one of those examples of like where you're talking about where there's no one that just is just good. He would have been like the character that would be like Jon Snow that was just good, but he becomes like the worst. You go
Yeah,
from
he
rooting for him.
loses it. He goes from
Yeah.
like 1 to 100
Yeah,
in
he
like one
really goes.
episode.
He goes from being like a friend to Rhaenyra to being like to calling her names and saying
Enemy
that she's
number
spoiled.
one. Yeah.
Right? Like he will
Like,
catch
I
her in the
love
back
you,
alley.
but now I hate your guts and I want you to die.
Seriously though. Oh, so I couple of things last I want to touch on before we get out of here for this. But I love Damon. Damon Targaryen is like a character that you love and you love to hate. He does some really like egregious, terrible things, but then at the same time, like you know that he's got your back. If he does have your back, if he's on your side, he's got your back. So I really like Matt Smith's portrayal. I didn't know how I would like Matt Smith in Game of Thrones because I see him from Doctor Who, but I think that he's doing an excellent job as Daemon Targaryen. I really enjoy seeing him, and I was hoping that they wouldn't kill him at the end of the season, so I'm happy to know that he's going to be going into future seasons.
I'm glad you brought him up actually because I had also seen him in Doctor Who, but he's also in The Crown and a lot of other stuff. So he's a really good actor. I really like him, and he does such a good job as Damon. And honestly, I didn't know. I thought that I was gonna not like Damon. I was like, oh, he's gonna be like the new Joffrey or whatever, and I thought he was gonna be the enemy of the show, even though he and Rhaenyra were, kind of chummy at the beginning.
Right.
But they show different sides of him. They show complexity in his character. And then they kind of show the hard side of him and they show the soft side of him. So he becomes actually quite a likable character because although he is looking out for himself, he still loves, like, extremely passionately. Like he has like the strongest love for just people that he loves. Like if you're loved by him, you are loved by him, and I think that means a lot in the show because, like you said, it's like one of the themes, but he's also like it's just his character is just so complex in that sense because he will love you, but then he will also protect himself, and he's also very hard. He has this shell, and I don't know. I don't know what else to say about him, but besides, like, he's just a very likable character. Even though at the beginning I really thought that he was gonna be very hated. He kind of reminds me of Jaime Lannister, where that journey, and all in this one season, where he starts off as someone that you don't like, but then because of how
Push the kid out of a window.
yeah, exactly, and he does some stuff, but then because he loves someone so much, he becomes someone like a good character, a good person, and I kind of see that journey happening for him.
Yeah, that's true. There's a saying that George Lucas would say about Star Wars. He would say it's like poetry; it rhymes, and I really feel like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, they rhyme. There's repeating themes, repeating motifs. It's a different time, it's a different setting with different characters, but the same kind of things are happening. But even though the same kind of things aren't happening, it's not the exact same story, and that I think is what makes it a great show, because there are recognizable aspects that you can pull out, but at the same time you're having a unique experience, and that's what makes it fun.
And you don't know what's going to happen, and I think
Yes.
that's what I love the best about this. That's why I loved Game of Thrones so much, is because I really didn't know what was going to happen, and I get that same vibe from the show.
Absolutely. But either way, we're running up on time. That's everything that I really wanted to talk about the show. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we go?
No, that's it for me.
But yeah, so that's what we thought about season 1 of House of the Dragon. What did you guys think about it? Did you enjoy it? Did you finish it? Are you planning on finishing it? Did you not watch it because you thought it wasn't going to be as good as, I guess, the first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones? Whatever you thought about it, comment below. Let us know. And while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, and subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and we'll see you all next time.